The Rorschach inkblot test, created in 1921, is still used by thousands of clinicians worldwide, appears in courtrooms to assess defendants, and shapes custody decisions. Yet rigorous meta-analyses show that its validity for diagnosing most conditions is weak and that some of its scores perform no better than chance. The history of personality assessment is a story of the tension between clinical intuition and empirical evidence. Projective tests present ambiguous stimuli, inkblots, ambiguous pictures, incomplete sentences, and ask the test taker to interpret or complete them. The theory, rooted in psychoanalytic thinking, is that because the stimulus has no correct interpretation, responses reflect the test taker's own unconscious conflicts, desires, fears, and personality characteristics, projected onto the ambiguous material. The freedom from obvious correct answers also makes projective tests less susceptible to deliberate impression management than self-report measures. Hermann Rorschach developed the inkblot test in 1921, presenting 10 standardized inkblot cards and recording what test takers see in them. Modern administration typically uses the Exner Comprehensive System, a standardized scoring protocol designed to improve reliability. The Rorschach has enjoyed enormous clinical popularity and cultural prominence. However, systematic reviews of its validity are sobering. While some scores, particularly those related to psychosis, show adequate validity, many widely used scores perform at or near chance levels for the conditions they are supposed to detect. The test is more controversial among researchers than among clinicians. The Thematic Apperception Test, or TT, presents a series of ambiguous black and white pictures and asks test takers to create a story about each. Who are the characters? What are they doing? What happened before? What will happen next? What are they thinking and feeling? The stories are assumed to reflect the narrator's own motives, conflicts, and interpersonal patterns. The TAT has been used to measure achievement motivation, power motivation, and affiliation motivation. Scoring reliability is typically lower than for objective tests, and validity evidence is mixed. The Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory, developed in the late 1930s and revised extensively, is the most widely researched and used objective personality test in clinical and forensic settings. Rather than starting from theory, the MMPI was developed empirically. Items that distinguished specific clinical groups from normal controls were retained regardless of their theoretical relevance. The MMPI, too, contains 567 true-false items and produces scores on 10 clinical scales: depression, hypochondriasis, psychopathy, and others, plus validity scales that detect response styles like faking good or faking bad. A unique and important feature of the MMPI is its set of validity scales designed to detect response biases that could invalidate the clinical scale scores. The L scale, or lie scale, detects overly favorable, implausible self-presentation, claiming an impossibly virtuous profile. The F scale detects infrequent responses, possible faking bad, confusion, or genuine severe psychopathology. The K scale measures subtle defensiveness. Modern versions have added scales detecting random responding and inconsistent answering patterns. These validity scales allow examiners to assess the interpretability of the clinical scales before drawing conclusions. The ENEO Personality Inventory, developed by Paul Costa and Robert McCrae, is the most widely used objective measure of the Big Five personality traits. The ENEO PI 3 contains 240 items and measures the 5 broad factors: neuroticism, extroversion, openness, agreeableness, and conscientiousness, along with 6 specific facets for each factor, providing a detailed personality profile. It has excellent reliability and validity for personality description and prediction, and has been translated and validated in dozens of languages and cultures. It is used in research, career counseling, and clinical assessment. Test reliability is the foundational requirement for any useful personality assessment. Test-retest reliability measures whether scores are stable over time for a trait that should be stable. Big Five personality scores show good test-retest reliability over months and years. Inter-rater reliability measures whether different scores produce the same scores, a chronic weakness of projective tests. Internal consistency measures whether all items on a scale measure the same underlying construct. No test can be valid without first being reliable, because unreliable measurement is dominated by random error. A critical but often overlooked standard for personality assessment is incremental validity, whether the test predicts outcomes beyond what is already predicted by simpler or cheaper methods. A clinician who already knows a patient's Big Five scores, structured clinical interview results, and behavioral history has a high bar to clear before an additional projective test adds value. Many projective tests fail to demonstrate incremental validity over simpler measures. The practical question is not whether a test has some validity in isolation, but whether it adds clinically useful information beyond what is already available. Personality assessment is a consequential enterprise. The results influence clinical diagnoses, employment decisions, custody determinations, and criminal sentencing. The ethical obligation to use only tests with demonstrated reliability and validity is therefore not merely academic. The gap between the clinical popularity of some tests and their empirical support should be a standing reminder that intuition, tradition, and familiarity are not substitutes for evidence.